So it's now being recorded, and let's go ahead and, okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, can you see my screen now? Hello?
Yes, we can. Did you start recording? You did. Okay, great. So go ahead, Bob.
Thank you very much, Alex. Let me just minimize this one thing that's in my way. I can't see. Uh, Zoom has its little quirks here. Okay, well, thanks for joining. And this is our session for the CoreTrustSeal training for the Server West Africa. That's looking at the requirement number 6 on the current CoreTrustSeal requirements. And so previously, we had looked at the various data stewardship concepts, the principles, and the instruments involved for getting certification, including CoreTrustSeal, the ISO 16363, and the Nestor. And we also talked about some of the concepts like preservation, the designated community, and sustainability, as well as the CoreTrustSeal certification requirements generally. And we'd also looked at the organizational aspects as well as the earlier requirements. They've been replaced now by the CoreTrustSeal requirements for 2023 through 2025. Next year, they'll be working on creating a revised CoreTrustSeal set of requirements. And the beauty of this is that the requirements keep getting better with community feedback as people are using them, as members of the Assembly of Reviewers are going through the requirements and assessing the applications. They see that there are areas where the requirements can be improved, and then they go ahead and do that. We've also talked about setting the stage for planning, and then motivation, and then the R0 through R5 requirements. And so today we're going to be talking about the R6 requirement. And again, it's going to be the lecture, questions, and discussion. And it is being recorded, so hopefully those who aren't with us today will be able to join on the recorded sessions, and so that they're not missing it. And so today what we're going to do is talk a little bit about our progress planning and any introductions of new folks that join us. I actually can't see if people are joining or not, so they'll have to let us know. We're going to schedule the next training session as well. Do a review of the templates where we have the draft CoreTrustSeal responses, and then we're going to look at requirement number 6 and some examples, and we'll have some homework on that as well. And if we have time, we'll introduce the CoreTrustSeal requirement number 7 and prepare for the next session. Okay, so we have been working with Surges, ICRSAT, FMNR, AFRIGIST, and AGROMET, as well as CSE. And so I'm hoping each repository can make progress in their template. And if there are any additional repositories joining, and I don't think any have today, we would just ask them to put their name and the repository and their email address in the Zoom, and then we can create a template for them as well. So seeing that we don't have any new ones, we're going to just move on. And so we're planning to meet twice a month, and in that regard, our next meeting will be on the 30th of October at the same time. And there we're going to talk about this R7 and then introduce R8. And so thinking about the homework, the templates that we have for the self-assessments, if there are any questions on any of those earlier ones, R0, R1, 2, 3, or 4, that we had talked about previously, any questions about the templates, we certainly would like to hear them, and or any comments or issues that people might have about them. We certainly want to hear them. And we have been looking them over and putting comments in and suggestions in the templates, and we're hoping that those are helpful. And so if we have any questions about any of the previous homework as well, it would be great to hear. We have seen some progress on the templates in R0 and Surgis, Agromet, and Icrosat FMNR. We featured those last week because we saw some great progress there, but to be quite frank, we really need to see more progress. And so Alex and I have both been offering some suggestions in those templates, and we're hoping that people will find those suggestions useful and that we can continue to make some progress on them. And if we do, we're going to feature those. Some of the examples that we see that might be helpful for others, we'll be talking about them, and then hopefully those will generate some more questions. So last time we talked about R5, which was governance and resources, and I actually didn't see any responses in the templates for R5 yet, but just like we've been doing with some of the other requirements, I've added some comments for R5, some suggestions that I'm hoping will be helpful. And so if we can make some progress in that regard, it would be great as well. For R5, basically, if we could just describe the type and the source and duration of the funding, describing the host institution for the repository and its relationship to the repository, as well as the governance body that's set up for the repository. And each repository really is different, as we had talked about last time. It's amazing how different they are. I'm always surprised to see the variety of ways in which the repositories are organized. And then also, it's important for the response to R5 to describe the decision-making structure. Having the leadership mentioned in there, and any other roles that repository staff members are taking in terms of directing the resources of the repository to meet its objectives. And then describing the number of repository staff members and their roles would be great as well. So today we're going to look at R6, and that's really focused on the expertise and guidance within the repository. And so R6 is that the repository adopts mechanisms to secure ongoing expertise, guidance, and feedback, either in-house or external. And both of these are important. You certainly want to have expertise in-house, but given that repositories are serving a community, we want to have representatives of that community who are able to give guidance to the repository as well. And so in order to address number 6, what we want to do is to identify the skills that are needed for the services that the repository offers, and then uh, identify those skills and how they are maintained internally, but also through working with the community members. So let me just read this. An effective repository strives to accommodate evolutions in data types, the volumes, and the rates as well. And we're doing this to adopt the most effective new technologies so that we can remain valuable to the designated community. And so within our communities, the technology changes and the needs of the communities change too. And often the community members, they want to be able to do more. And as repositories, we certainly want to be able to provide the capabilities so that they can do more. So what the variety of members in our communities, whether they're the expert members who are the experts in the resources that we're providing, or they're say students or other learners, or even the members of the general public. We certainly want to have guidance available so that we can learn about ways to improve our resources and meet those community needs. So the guidance certainly should reflect the scientific scope of the repository, and it should be aligned with the internal recruitment. That is, when we're recruiting staff, we want to make sure that we're identifying people with that kind of expertise to become staff members of the repository. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we have that engagement with the external members of the community who can help to guide the way we offer our data products, our other resources, and our services. We also want to ensure that the staff have ongoing training and professional development. So you'll see in some of these examples that we look at the different types of training, the professional development, the external expertise that is brought to bear on the different repositories so that they can improve. It's also important to talk about the range and depth of the expertise, not only of the organization and its staff, but of other affiliated organizations that are working with the repository. And these should be appropriate for the mission, of course. And then we also want to have people who are in-house advisors. That is, they might be members of the host organization, as well as any external advisory committee members. Establishing an advisory committee is certainly a great way to get advice and to find ways of improving the service that's offered to the community. And these could be technical advice. It could be advice on the way the data or other resources are being curated. It could be towards data science, security issues, which are always a challenge, and as well as having disciplinary experts sharing their knowledge with the repository staff. And then we want to be able to understand how the repository communicates with the experts to obtain their advice. So one way to do this is to have a community or a watch or a technology watch. And that is to understand the pulse of the community, if you will, understand what their needs are, not only today, but what their expectations are for how the repository services might improve to further meet their needs. Likewise, the repository should be watching the different um, uh, advances in technology that are taking place. And so there's lots of other repositories that are working on trying to serve their communities as well. And many are developing new skills, new capabilities, uh, new tools, for example. And by understanding what other repositories are doing, externally and bringing those ideas into our own repositories, we can all improve. And so when we're completing an application for CoreTrustSeal, we want to show evidence of not only the day-to-day activities and how we address the challenges, but how we're working with the community and understanding how we can improve our capabilities to meet their ongoing needs. So I want to share an example from Scion. This is a South African Environmental Observation Network, and they obtained CoreTrustSeal certification a few years back, but I thought that this would be a really great example to share with you of how they're addressing requirement number 6. And so you might notice here in the example from their report, they've established advisory committees. And these are associated with the domains that they're working in. That is the disciplines, the different subject areas. And you see here, in their case, they're working with the forestry, the fisheries, and the environment groups. Also, they're working with the International Long-Term Ecological Research Network. And they've got an information management committee for that. And then they're working with the South African Geomatics Council, the Geoinformation Society of South Africa, and they also are contributing to DataSite, which is another organization of repository. So they're showing here examples of the external groups that they're working with and how they're working directly with them to improve their own capabilities and to take a look at how their own capabilities might be serving their community and uh, how the needs of the communities are being addressed by the repository. You might notice here also that Scion's saying that they're taking part in a number of Research Data Alliance interest groups. So the Research Data Alliance is an international organization of, it's got repository managers, repository staff members, some of the technical people from repositories in it. And it also has a representation of scientific members, people who teach on these topics in there as well. And so it's a very broad community of people who are interested in research data, and this is very international. It's they have their meetings in various locations throughout the globe, and uh, they have so many experts in there. And what's really most valuable, I think, about the Research Data Alliance is the different interest groups that they've established and working groups as well. And the interest groups tend to be a bit more permanent. And the interest groups, they identify a particular topic of interest to the community, a particular need that needs to be addressed, for example, by repositories, and they'll focus on that, and they'll work on that for say, an 18-month period to try to meet a particular objective, and that might be to develop some guidance for repositories. It might be to develop a tool, and in doing this, they get lots of input from various members of the community who join in the activity, and so the result is not only helpful for all those who have joined the activity, but they produce products, services, tools, etc., that then are available for others to use. So this is a great way for the community to get together and to share their knowledge, and a great way for a repository to learn from others in the community. Then also, I should say that Scion, they're encouraging their team members to publish occasionally. So uh, this is an added effort where they're creating these incentives so that they can encourage the ways to identify improvements that they can put into practice. Talking a little bit more about what Scion has in their application for CoreTrustSeal. So they're structured as both a repository and an observation network, and that means that they have access to the scientists and the researchers. So they're talking about how they're engaging with the people in the field. And they're saying that in order to do this, they've established 6 nodes. So they're getting feedback through each of these nodes, and each of these nodes is working with members of their designated community. And so they've got this committee that serves their data management committee, and it's serving as an advisory board. So they also have this technicians forum meeting. And so you can see here how they're showing that they're working with the community in a lot of different ways. They're working to improve the technology that they're using. They're working with the community to improve the management and identify how the services can be improved. And they're also encouraging the community members to send feedback to them on either the products or the services that they're offering, so that they can continuously strive to improve their capabilities to the community. Okay, another example is the ICPSR. They're the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. People just refer to them as ICPSR. They're actually quite well known internationally. Many of you have probably heard of them. They are well established, as we given an example from their application last time. And I think that when we look at the example from ICPSR, it shows us the kinds of resources that many repositories don't necessarily have, but we can certainly strive and try to improve to obtain similar capabilities that they're offering. Excuse me. So in their application, they talk about their in-house expertise and the various ways that they have this expertise. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. So they're talking about the digital archiving, expertise in data preservation, usability testing, compliance with different laws, in being able to register persistent identifiers, and in this case, they're using the digital object identifiers. Their expertise is in web traffic analytics, search engine optimization, secure data storage and dissemination, restricted use data agreements, and researcher credentialing. So it's a fantastic, these many areas in which they have expertise. And they go on to talk about how when they're recruiting and hiring their people, they're looking for that expertise. And they're also, once they get the staff hired, they're providing ongoing professional development so that their staff can be familiarized with the latest technologies and start to apply those. And they're giving examples here in terms of their curation staff and their privacy and security. Also, in terms of how their senior staff are experts in various disciplines, and how their council members are also experts, and so they've got this council that they're working with, and that council is advising them on how they can improve their existing capabilities and adopt new capabilities. And they talk about their council is supplemented by an advisory committee of leading scholars. So and they're representing various fields as well. So you can see here the vast amount of resources that they have here. And, many repositories don't have these kinds of resources, but they certainly want to be able to learn from the kinds of activities that ICPSR is offering and engaging in, so that we can all try to emulate that kind of service and be able to improve our own capabilities. So looking further at what ICPSR has done, they mentioned how they regularly communicate with their designated community, and they talk about how they're doing that. So they've got over 800 consortial official representatives, and they have biennial meetings. And so, yeah, you can see this is quite extensive. And I guess this is like the gold standard, if you will, of what repositories might try to accomplish. And, they're also doing surveys of their sponsors and of the community as well. And they're trying to understand exactly how they might be able to improve. And this is an ongoing effort. And even though a lot of us, they see the resource and we say, hey, this is so much. For ICPSR, they're constantly trying to improve that even further. And we're glad to see that, because they share what they're doing with the rest of us, and we're learning from that and seeing ways in which we can improve as well. And they also talk about their host organization at the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research, and how they have these reviews with that to ensure that they're improving and providing the services, and have the capacity, and as well as the educational strength and overall efficiency. So looking at another part of the world here, we're looking in the Netherlands, and the repository is DANS. And so their application states that they're meeting with their scientific advisory council several times a year, and they're getting this advice either solicited or unsolicited. And then their council, it's consisting of disciplinary experts, and their fields are sociology and survey data, and they're also seeking expertise in information technology. So you can see here that they are working across various fields to try to ensure that they're not only keeping up with the technological changes, but they're also trying to understand how they might be able to improve their services for the community. And so they talk about their advisors giving them advice for legal issues and privacy and security, which is always important when you're working with survey data. And then how they have the data station, social science and humanities domain, data station managers working with them. And so they're leading their data station effort in order to get that expertise and improve their capabilities for serving their community. And so looking a little bit further at what Dons has said about their expertise and guidance, they're working also with the RDA. See, they're mentioning that, the Research Data Alliance, which we had talked about, the World Data System, which is part of the International Scientific Council, and as well as CoreTrustSeal, the Assembly of Reviewers. And so, as we talked about before, once a repository becomes certified, they have members of the repository joining the Assembly of Reviewers, and that way we're all working together to review each other's applications and identify areas for improvement and how a particular repository might qualify for CoreTrustSeal certification. And so they're talking about how this helps them as well. That is, by working with all these different international organizations, they're increasing their own professional knowledge. And they're mentioning that they have a budget line for staff training and further professionalization. I think that's a great point. And one way to ensure that you are you have the ongoing training and professional development of your staff is to establish a budget line for that, so that you can then follow through and ensure that the staff are getting their training and professional development. And they go on to talk about how they're working with national and international projects. And this is very important because through these projects, you can learn about new tools that are being developed and then adopt those tools for your own repository and even see how others have adopted them. And that can be quite informative because when you're seeing that different repositories have adopted the same tool but in different ways, you can identify how a particular tool might be adopted in your own repository. In other words, you might want an efficient way to adopt it, or you might want to adopt just aspects of a tool, or you might want to adopt, an entire tool, which might even require changing other aspects of the services that you offer. So looking a little further, we see the Purdue University repository. They have the acronym PER and for their repository, and their application They talk about how their staff attend the professional conferences, workshops, webinars, etc. And they mention that these are both in person and virtual. So they've got these efforts as an ongoing activity to have their staff keep up with the changes in technology, and also to be aware of different resources they might be able to adopt. So, and they give an example of GIS Day, which is, of course, Geographic Information Systems, and they have lectures by faculty on this to help them to further understand how they might be able to improve their data-related services. They're also talking about how they're working with different parts of the university. So, for example, the university library and the School of Information Studies faculty. They're working with them and learning based on the knowledge that those faculty members have. And then they also mention another team that they have, they're calling the Hub Zero team, and their involvement with other science gateways, so that they're getting a very rich understanding of the different cyber infrastructure capabilities that are out there and how they might be able to adopt some of these for their own repository. They also talk about how they're involved externally with this Big Ten Academic Alliance. This is a, a group of different universities in the Midwestern part of the United States that all work together, and they've formed a digital preservation group so that they can improve their adoption of capabilities. And they mention a few, like the data site, which offers the persistent identifier, as well as other capabilities for repositories to adopt, and ORCID, which is another type of identifier, and the OCLC, Center for Research Libraries. So these are all different external groups that they're working with, and showing that by working with these, they're improving their capabilities. And they also talk about how they have a steering committee and how that establishes the policies for preservation of the data that they get. And so, this is a lot of different directions that they're showing that they're working on, both internally and externally, in order to improve their capabilities. And so, in terms of working on the template for the CoreTrustSeal certification for requirement 6 expertise and guidance, what we want to do is to answer questions like, what type of training and expertise guides the services of the repository? And so this could be internal training that's provided to staff members, even by its own management, periodically, to reinforce their understanding of the different types of services that they're providing, and their understanding of even the community that they serve and how they might be able to serve that community better. And then another question is, how do the repository services inform the recruitment and community engagement? And so here we might want to look at how the repository is obtaining new staff members, how they're working with the community to identify staff members or potential staff members, candidates who might be able to be recruited for the repository, and how that community engagement is informing that recruitment process. Another question is how they describe the training and professional development of the staff members. In other words, the repository should be establishing different types of training that the staff members could be getting periodically, and not only to improve its capabilities, but also to improve the knowledge and understanding of the staff members so that they'll be better equipped to serve the community. And the application should also describe the relevant expertise and affiliations of the organization's staff. In other words, some staff members might be members of different professional organizations or associations. They could be scientific societies, for example. And by having those kinds of memberships, the staff members can learn from the people that they're engaging with in those organizations. Sometimes those organizations have guest speakers coming in, for example, and then the staff members who are members of those organizations can learn from those kinds of presentations. And also just by engaging with the other members of those professional societies and organizations, staff members can learn about different tools that are being adopted, different technologies that are on the horizon that the staff members should be aware of. And then these staff members can bring this knowledge back to the organization, to the repository, and share that with the other members of the repository. And by this kind of external engagement, the repository members should be able to help all the members of the repository to improve their capabilities. And then we also want the application to describe the internal and external advisors that guide the services that are offered and how the repository communicates with experts to obtain advice. And this might be, establishing an external advisory board, an advisory board that represents the users or segments of the user community, so that the repository can then begin to understand how it might be able to improve its services. So before we talk about preparing for the next session, I see that there are some comments in the chat, but I actually cannot see those comments. Let me see what.
They're not terribly relevant, so I don't think you have to.
Well, yeah.
So go
Oh,
ahead, keep going.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Alex and Glory. So for the next session, what we want to do is to update our template. So please, everyone, try to get your templates in front of you. Look at what you responded to in the previous for the previous requirements. Look at how you might be able to improve those. And Alex and I have both offered some comments in there on those. But also look at the requirements for the current R6 in terms of the expertise that the repository has and the expertise that it's trying to obtain from others externally. And then if the managers of the repository and the staff members can get together and discuss some of these responses, they might identify additional ways to elaborate on how they're doing this. That is, what activities are engaging in, what external groups that some of the staff members might belong to, or that some of the managers might belong to. And please remember that the template is just it's like a worksheet. It's uh, to gather our ideas. So if your response isn't perfect, that's fine. Just start to, with a simple list even of some of the ideas that then can be elaborated on. The important thing is to start uh, identifying some of the ideas in terms of the expertise that the repository has, the expertise that it's getting from the outside community, whether these are in from other organizations or uh, through the staff members' affiliations with other organizations. These should all be documented in the template, and then it could just be a simple list to start out with, and then we can then start to talk about what those relationships mean in terms of the expertise that the repository is acquiring and possesses. And then as we're working on the requirements or the response to the requirements for R6, what we're going to find, I see this with lots of repositories that I'm working with, when you're working on one response, you realize that it's related to another response, and that's a good point to immediately go and to add a few notes to another response. And they don't have to be complete sentence. It could just be an idea that came to one of the staff members, and if it gets jotted down in the response for the relevant requirement, then later on that can be further elaborated on, and the response can be improved. And this way, we're not just working on the response to requirement 6, we're working on the responses to all of the different requirements. So let me just stop for a second here and see if there are any questions. And if not, I'm going to uh, well, I have a little announcement here that might be exciting, uh, and that we've explored all of the requirements in terms of organizational infrastructure, and that's R1 through R6. And so we have finished exploring them, and next we're going to focus on the requirements of in the group called Digital Object Management. So these are the requirements, the CoreTrustSeal requirements for R7 through R13 that we're going to be focusing on in the following sessions. But before we do that, let me just quickly review R1 through R6. R1 was mission and scope, where we talk about the explicit mission. And if a particular repository doesn't have a mission yet, working with our templates, we can start to just develop a very simple mission statement, just the very broadest statement about what it is the repository is trying to do. For R2, we can talk about how the repository is managing the rights and is associated with the resources that it gets, and it's monitoring compliance with those rights. For R3, our template can talk about the plan that the repository has to ensure that it's going to operating over time. And well, this can be one of the most challenging requirements to meet, and we saw some examples from other repositories where they're still working on this, where this is a great challenge because it requires resources in the future, and trying to guarantee such resources is well, it's a challenge. For the response for R4, we want to talk about how the repository is ensuring that the legal and ethical norms of the community or the region are being followed in terms of the creation of data and metadata, its curation, and how we preserve and provide access to it. And then for our 5, governance and resources, and this can be challenging too, but we want to talk about the funding that's available and the staff members, the capabilities of the staff, the number of staff we might have who are serving in different capabilities, and what resources we have in terms of information technology, for example. And it can also be resources that we're getting from others or working with the community to obtain. So these don't all have to be internal resources. And then 6, requirement number 6, which we just talked about, there we want to explain the expertise that we have, that we possess within the repository in terms of the current staff, how we recruit staff to ensure that they have that expertise, and how we're working with the external community to improve the expertise that we have, to improve our understanding of the community and of new capabilities that we might want to adopt. Okay, so looking forward now, next, in subsequent sessions, we're going to be talking about digital object management, and that's R7 through 13. And so briefly, I'm just going to talk about each of these. R7, which we'll introduce very quickly today, is going to talk about the provenance and the authenticity of the digital objects that the repository offers to its community. Its capabilities for deposit and appraisal in terms of requirement 8, and that is any criteria that might be used to accept the data, to appraise the data, any guidance that's offered to the repository depositors and data producers, or it might be that a representative of the data producer is the depositor, or it might be the same person. The preservation plan for the repository, how it's going to ensure that the data are available not only today and tomorrow, but in years to come. The quality of the services that the repository offers. That is it complying with any standards in order to ensure that its resources and the services and tools that it has are in compliance with those standards and are ensuring that the quality is being attained and provided to the user community over time. R11, here we're going to talk about the workflows of the repository, and importantly, how we are describing our workflows to the community so that they can understand what we're doing to take the data that community members produce and share through the repository, how we curate that data, how we preserve that data, and how we make that data accessible and understandable to the community members. So that should all be described in a general workflow so that members of the community who are considering either depositing data to the repository or in using the resources offered by the repository, so those community members will be able to understand what's really happening at the repository, how the repository works, if you will. R12 is talking about discovery and identification. Here we want to describe how the repositories enable users to find the data and access them, and how such discovery capabilities are available and will be available in the future. And then how the repository enables reuse in requirement 13. And that's how the repository is ensuring that the resources that it offers are actually going to be understandable, not only by today's community members, that is the designated community of the repository, but looking into the future in terms of who it's going to be serving in the future, tomorrow, next year, and the following years, and how it's going to ensure that those community members will be able to understand the data and other resources offered by the repository. So those are the digital object management requirements. And so today we're just going to take a very brief look at R7, provenance and authenticity. And so generally, R7 states that the repository guarantees the authenticity of digital objects and provides provenance information. So what we want to do is to show that the repository provides evidence that it operates a data and metadata management system. And it maintains the provenance information about the resources that it has so that it can ensure the authenticity of these resources from the time that they are deposited all the way through the entire workflow through the curation of the resources, the preservation of the resources, and all the way to the point of where the resources are being accessed and used by the community. And so this also involves any intentional changes to data and metadata that are documented. So we want to make sure that the data that are received, if there are changes being made to them, that they are well documented so that people can understand how those data have been changed and why they've been changed and who made the changes. And it might be that the repository is learning from the community about ways that the metadata could improve so that the community could better understand the data, for example. And authenticity also covers the reliability and provenance, including the relationship between the deposited digital objects and those provided at the point of access. So what we want to show is any changes that take place in a digital object that's submitted, and it might be that the changes are made by the depositor, that is, the repository might be looking at the resource and saying, well, the metadata is not quite describing these data, and asking the data producer to describe them a little bit better so that users will understand how they might be able to use the data. And that could just be a change in the metadata, for example. But we want to understand or allow the community to understand how the repository does that. And likewise, if there are subsequent changes throughout the process. And so when we have a response statement in our templates, for example, We want to show that the repository's approach to changing and versioning the data and the metadata, and how the approach and the records of changes are communicated to both the data depositors and to the users of the data, so that we can see what changes are taking place, how they're taking place. And versioning is a great way to do that, but uh, how the versioning takes place should really be described, what the criteria are for making a new version, for example. The statement also should include the provenance information on audit trails recorded for data and metadata processing and versioning. So sometimes when you're processing data, you can have an automatic audit trail that shows what processes have taken place, and if there were any errors caught, for example, perhaps the values for a particular data variable were out of range and they might have been identified during the review. And in that case, the repository might speak with the data producer about that. It might be an error that was overlooked and needs to be corrected. And then that would result in a new version of the data, for example. And that would be documented as a change from the previous version, and exactly what change took place. That is, perhaps variables were corrected, for example. And then we also want to document how the repository compares the essential properties of different versions of the same file. What a repository should be doing is checking each file as it comes in, and documenting the characteristics of that file. And people use different tools for this. It could be, for example, a checksum tool, which creates a digital signature of the files. And then if you compare digital signatures, that is, you're taking a digital signature over time of those files, and then comparing them, you can see if any changes have taken place. And so you're verifying the authenticity of your files at that point. And then also the identification checks that the repository is completing to ensure that the depositors, or the deposits are coming from the depositors they believe that the deposits are coming from. And it might be that they have a personal meeting with the depositor. They might be having a meeting with the team of data producers, and even introduced to the person who will be representing the team and depositing the data on behalf of the team. So there are various checks that the repository could be engaging in to do that. Anyway, that's it for this session. We've already reviewed the different requirements, and R7 is the newest one we're going to be talking about next week. And as I mentioned, in subsequent weeks, we'll be talking about R7 through R13. So I don't know if there were any questions. Let me stop sharing at this point. And
Yes.
please go ahead, Zaharuddin.
Okay, great. I would like to know, for example, is there any scientific requirements, like from the CoreTrustSeal side, for the data, let's say, not only provenance and authenticity, but also data quality, like something to weigh data convenability, or I don't know. It is for the repository, like to fix these terms.
Yes, there are actually, it touches on a couple different of the requirements. Certainly when we talk about the deposit and an appraisal of the data, the repository would have an opportunity to talk about the criteria that it's using to assess the data as they come in. In other words, these could be the scientific requirements associated with the data, but they also could be curatorial requirements. In other words, requirements associated with having descriptive metadata. In other words, the title of the repository of the data or other content should reflect the content itself, so that anybody who's just reading the title gets a general idea of that. And it could be a scientific term that is reflecting either the instrument or the time period or the characteristics of, say, the environment that was measured scientifically. Also, the description, and it might be like a summary or an abstract, that would be reviewed to make sure that that is giving the user enough information about the data and the instrument, how the collection process was completed, all of those aspects from a scientific perspective, but ideally in language that is understandable by, say, even a student, so that different members of the designated community can understand the science that's represented in the data, the measurements, the kinds of measurements that were taken, when the measurements were taken, et cetera, so that they can understand whether the data are going to be useful for their particular purpose. That is, if they've got a scientific study they're thinking of completing, they want to make sure that that is covered. Also, the requirement for quality. That's another requirement where we describe the quality of not only of the services of the repository, but the kinds of quality that the repository will be checking for. Um, in the data itself, that is, does it have members of the community completing a review of a data set or other content before it's released to the public, and how that review takes place. And in a way, that also is covered a little bit under the requirement that we talked about today, uh, in terms of expertise, because we might have an external advisory committee, for example, that also reviews our data in terms of the scientific domain represented by some of the members of that committee. And so those are three requirements right away that will each touch on different aspects of the science quality of the data. Excuse me. I don't know, did I answer your questions, Zahar or Dean, or?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. You're very welcome. I appreciate that question. And it goes to show how the different requirements are related to each other. And so if you're working on one response in the template, for example, and you're talking about the expertise like we did today, and you're talking about an advisory committee perhaps that you're working with that's representing the user community, then the that discussion might trigger an idea related to the kinds of quality assessment that that committee is conducting. And you might then make a note under the appraisal requirement and how that appraisal is being done, and make even another note under the quality assessment. So by thinking about the scientific quality of the data, you might actually be completing three different or parts of three different requirements in the template. So anyway, I did promise to end the session early today, and so seeing that we're very close to the end, are there any other questions? And if not, I want to say thank you, all of you, for your attention today, and for the viewers who view the recording after it's put up. And then also, I want to remind you that our next meeting is on October 30th at the same time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then. And please invite other members of your repositories to join that time. So with that, I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank everyone for joining us. Bob will share the video with me, and I will make it available on YouTube.
Yes.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, as a long time ago, I suggest it's like lunchtime here. I think that's why from our hub, there are so many, some of them they miss. So please, Glory, send a reminder to all of these attendees if you can, please.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
very much.
Yeah.
But everybody always get the messages. Bob sends those reminders every now and then.
Oh, thank you.
What you can do for us is for you to actually help us. Like I was telling Bob, we should discuss this at SAGE. And if you can get all the groups to come around, and then we emphasize the importance, they should nominate someone who will always be in the meeting. That would be a good one. So I will remind you when we get to SAGE, please.
Yes, please. Yes.
Great. That's great.
Thank you very much, all of you. Bye-bye
All
now.
right. Thank you,
Okay.
Bob. Have a great day.